Hi, Ats. Welcome to Sea Talk.
How you doing, Paul? Good to see you,
Good,
mate.
good. Great to have you back on here again. And, personally, thank you for supporting the campaign that we're all involved in now in this Gemban Protect Your Store campaign against government to get them to realise what's actually going through us as family-run convenience stores and also our families. That's our teams in our stores, right? Which is the most important part of our stores. And that's what I want to talk to you about. One of the most important elements in this, which is the abuse factor of with the generation ban coming in and the silly date that the government have put in, 1st of Jan 2009, of that age, talk to me about the abuse. And look, you for one have had issues in your store and your team is your family. You always say to all of us, it's my family. So just tell us
Yeah.
about what this is going to potentially do for you and your family.
Look, by no means can we paint a picture where everything's hunky-dory. This is just adding. This is another big weight on our shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in essence, no one's against the ban on tobacco. Well, obviously, society is going to be better for it.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a consequence of this ridiculously ill. The vision is so ill judged, right? And it's being pushed through based on it's the right thing to do. But what about the right thing for the people that are law abiding, running honest businesses with teams in place and their safety? Because we know that the abuse for shop staff is already up. I hate that word staff. Like we said, they are our retail family. And they can be in a multiple or they can be an independent. We're focusing on the independents at the minute. I get that, right?
Correct.
But we are running professional outfits. We do everything we're supposed to be doing under legislation as it stands. And we will have to do whatever comes of this. But you know what? The beauty of this is that we will only get heard if we make a noise.
Correct.
Do you know what I mean? And you making this noise and getting people behind it and the likes of me being able to support it, it makes me feel proud of our industry, but we just need the government to understand. You stood on a slogan of change, right? When you won, and we were there, Paul, at the Houses of Parliament when the new government came in, and all of that, the aspirations we had of change, and nothing's changing. It's the same ill thought out process of putting legislation through because someone says that that's the right thing to do. All we're asking is that whilst you want to do that, enforce us with what we need to be able to do that properly. And it's just not in place. Is there any resources in training standards? No. Is there an age verification situation that should be automated? Why should my staff have to deal with confronting someone, another human being, with what age they are? Why can't we use tech, right? Are they supporting us with tech for this? How expensive can that be, right? But we could all do our job a lot better if we had the backing, right?
Correct.
And we don't seem to have the backing there, right?
Yep. Yeah, and it's very poor. I mean, when we look at abuse, who do we turn to in our industry? Who's there from? Who does government actually give us? Who we can talk to about mental health well-being in our store. If one of our team members, gets verbally abused, that's a mental impact on them on the day. They're sometimes thinking, do I go back into the store tomorrow to work again? Because what if I get that abuse again, right? And look, when you're of a legal age to buy a product, and then we're already doing the maths on the till now, and we've got verification systems on our till prompt, but there's going to be how many more prompts are we going to have to put on the till? But then how many more jobs are we going to put on that cashier on that day to not only be, keeping an eye on what's going on in the store, but actually trying to work all these silly ages out every day? It's a big burden.
Listen, those are issues that we have as shopkeepers, right? As independent retailers, and we'll deal with those, right? My concern is I want support in giving my staff a safe place to work.
Correct.
Right? A safe place to work. So when they're serving someone, they're not worrying about, oh my God, now I've got to ask a question and I don't know how it will go, right? That's not a safe space. You know, one of the things that I've always believed in retail is, right, to try and take away any kind of barriers to the customer getting what they need.
Correct.
Right? Now, because of the law, I have to ask these questions. And if there's a prompt on our system, luckily a lot of us are local retailers, and you kind of generally know when you can bypass it. But you know what? On occasion, we do have to use it, and it does give us diligence, right? But here's the thing: how are you supposed to tell a difference between a 34 and a 35-year-old? Do you know what I mean? And given a Friday night when everyone's a little bit chilled and whatever, and all of a sudden you're prodding someone for their age. Do they really want to be questioned for that? So something that would have been automated would have been fine, right? Right. Yeah. Invest and give us grants to have vending machines, for instance, that does an age verification on yourself. Just take my staff out of that issue of maybe having this abuse. The other side of the abuse situation, right, is that, all right, we're focusing on the fact that it's age verification that could cause a problem. But you know what? My staff and the customer that comes in, we don't know what's going on in people's heads, right? Correct. All we want to do is give them a lovely, lovely environment to shop, right? And on occasion, my staff may have issues, personal or whatever it is. Having a situation where they now have to go feeling the way they are and ask a question, knowing that there could be abuse coming at them, you know, that's gonna go tenfold in their thinking and the way they run the rest of their shift. And we have to manage that. How do you manage that?
Let me read your response from the letter I got from the Ministerial Correspondence and Public Inquiries team for Jonathan Reynolds. In point 3, concerns about retailer abuse. The point he's put in there: the government will not stand for violence and abuse against shop workers. Everybody has a right to feel safe on the job. The government will introduce a new offence of assaulting a retailer worker to protect the hardworking and dedicated staff that work in stores. Now, that hasn't happened before. We phone the police, we have abuse or an attack where there's no support. Do you really think this is going to happen? I don't.
Paul, do you know what? Our lives are busy enough as they are, right?
Yeah.
And whilst I totally agree with we should be reported any form of crime that happens, I get it, right? But to be honest, if nothing is going to come of you and you haven't given the resources to police to enforce any of this, right, then why am I going to take time out of my day? I would rather spend the time it will take me to do all of the paperwork on looking after the member of staff that's just had the abuse. And put my arm around them and making sure they get a shift off, or, you know, let's go and get them some other kind of help, because that's what we have to do. We cannot rely on these guys pursuing a case against someone that came in and told one of my staff to F off or pushed or created some issue where they go and knock down some product on the way out.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's abuse. It's full on abuse to our location, right?
And that is a big problem. I mean, look, you've been in the retail as long as I have, right? And we're pretty lucky. We've got a really good support network of friends around us. We can always go to, and we can get that advice and support. Now, some retailers haven't got that network, right? They still don't know who to turn to and who to get that support of. I mean, you should be pretty proud of what you guys created, you know, retailers for retailers. And, you know, look, people talk to each other and just get that sometimes that bit of anger out, and they need that someone to talk to, that support, right? But look, we haven't.
What we've created, Paul, what we've created with retailers for retailers, right, is just a space where we can come together on a Monday or a Thursday, right? Yeah. Between 7 and 9 and 5 o'clock and 7 on a Thursday, right? And you know what you tend to find is that I personally know what I'm getting out of it as a facilitator, and I can only speak on my behalf here, right? So what I'm getting is that I have a space where I can go and relieve some of my frustrations or listen and kind of empathize with someone else that's maybe having some issues. And it's brilliant, right? It works. And what it's allowed me to do is use all the other time to just focus on what I need to do Does that make sense? Because these issues can play around in your head all day long, every day. And actually, now I know I have a space where I can go and share, vent, listen, and empathize with someone. It gives me the ability on all the other days or whatever it is to say to myself, right, I've got this to do, and that to do. Let's get on with it. And you get a little bit more focused because it actually relieves some of the tension from you. Now, I would recommend to everyone to come on as much as they can. And we've got the link out there for people to come and join. And we're there every Monday and Thursday. For staff, we've got the process of, let's say, something like grocery aid. Do you know what I mean? But more often than not, the people that are working for us are doing this shift in a part-time basis, right? And then they've got to go somewhere else.
Yes.
Right? Either pick up their kids or whatever it is, life. Have they got the time to be sitting on a phone and talking about their issue in their shift? I think we need to bring this in-house for ourselves, right? With regards to looking after our staff. But give us the resources. If you want legislation in place that's going to make society better, by all means, I'm with it. But give us the resources to be able to help us facilitate that change. And I think that would be tech, etc. Right? Because right now, everyone is at their end of their tether. We wanted some change, and we're not getting it. We're not. We've got no new thinking going on out there. It's the same old stuff. And you know what? If I blamed you for the last 5 years of trading, right? And I told, well, it's not my fault. It was the way the budget was. Well, you're in place now, so make some change.
Yeah.
Do you know, Labour? I'm sick and tired of hearing it.
Yeah. So there's got to be change. So if I asked you then on one strong message that from this video you want to send to Jonathan Reynolds and his team, what would it be?
If you want a safer society, right, stop putting barriers in place for us to be able to do our job, right? Take more responsibility for the action that you're creating here. And it's as simple as that. You know, stop putting my people on the front line at danger. We don't know how someone's going to react. You know, by all means, come to my store on a Friday or Saturday or one of these days where, you know, people are coming in and they've had some drink or whatever, and then ask them to check their age and see what the reaction's like.
Yep.
Come and do a shift.
That's a powerful message, Ats, because apart from election time, we hardly ever see these ministers. They don't come out of Westminster. They don't understand what goes on in our stores, in our neighbourhoods, in our communities. You know, we are, you know, that place where someone only has that conversation on a day-to-day basis. You know, we're that community store.
Absolutely. And Paul, I've had my local MP, Danny Beals, come to the store and spend a few hours with me. And what a wonderful guy. And he was very, very empathetic, understood what I was telling him. But do you know what? Unfortunately, because of, again, even he's a very busy person as I am, you know, after the visit, you know, there's no follow-up. There's no, even I mentioned to him about the generational ban and the issues it's going to, and he was sympathetic, but there was nothing that shows me that it's been taken on board. He's gone and researched what they can maybe do, and other people maybe kind of feeding into the government and saying, look, okay, we understand their concerns, but we've got this, and this in place. That would make us feel better. What we're getting here is we're on this end saying that we're going to have problems if this is implemented the way it is, right? And on the other end, there's nothing coming back telling us, we understand your concerns, but we've got this, and this in place. There's none of that.
Well, we had
You've
that.
had to wait how long for a response?
Yeah,
how long have you had to wait for a response?
Oh, a long time. You know, I would say over 5 weeks to get this response, right? And that was 2 follow-up letters. And, you know, I phoned a Labour councillor on the other side of Coventry following a big raid in that area. And I said, look, this is what I'm about. This is what we're doing. And you just had a massive raid in your area on illicit tobacco that are getting into the hands of the wrong people. He says, let me stop you there. I'm not supporting what you've called me for. I'm supporting the ban. And I says, but you're not understanding what the ban's going to do. And you've got a big problem in your constituency already that you're not understanding what's happening. But straight answer, you don't want to listen. And that's a local level.
Let me give you another a real world example of what happened to me a few weeks ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not gonna make it humorous. Look, I went to the barbers to have a haircut, and I'm sitting in there, and one of the barbers goes out and has a cigarette, and I just happened to notice the packet that he was smoking, and it was branded, which means it was illicit,
Yep.
right? And I said, "Oh, what are those you're smoking?" And he goes, "Oh, these look, oh, like they're £6 a pack." I was like, "Okay." Considering that our cheapest packet is what, 14 pound.
14 quid.
So
Yeah.
I'm not, yeah, you know, and understandably he's gone and done whatever. I don't know. I know that he's not been on holiday because he's been cutting my hair for the last 3 weeks, over the last 3 weeks. So no, he's not been away. So he's getting it from somewhere, and that's just a barber's, right? This is happening in every other store on the high street that you can find, right? If someone hasn't set up an illegal business to sell tobacco or doing it from under the counter, you got Joe Blogs that's running a hairdressers or a beauty salon or this, that, and the other selling illicit tobacco. And
Correct.
if someone put the resources into fighting that and finding these people, the Treasury would see a massive difference in the income that they get from tobacco. That's legitimate.
Yeah.
Right?
So on this letter
on
this letter that I got, these figures, they're not true because they're not understanding what's going through the black market, right? They're just on the presumption of what's going through legally, and they're saying there's a decline legally, but it's not because most of that trade has now gone to the dark side, right?
You go any pub, right? You see just as many people smoking outside, don't you? As well as vaping.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. My sales are telling me I'm in decline.
Yeah.
They're getting them from somewhere.
Yeah.
And they're not legitimate sources.
No. But I think that's what they need to realise, rather than just thinking generation ban and this will solve the problem. They won't get into the hands of youngsters. Actually, these illicit stores, they're the ones that are doing the problem, causing the problem, right? And I think
look, if we don't shout enough, we just got to keep shouting louder, right? And listen, as I said to you, I'm 100% behind you. I'm invested. I've spent time in Parliament, and whilst we're dealing with certain lords that are very sympathetic to our concerns, you know, when we spoke to them on the last occasion at one of their lunches, and we just spoke from our heart. You know, four of us in the 4 retailers there just spoke from our heart about our concerns for our staff. You know, because the abuse end of this. Now, you know, they took it on board and said, give us examples. So I think we've even posted videos to them to show them what kind of abuse happens to us. You know, where you're just trying to just run a business and you know, manage your staff well, and they're having to put up with this kind of horrible situation where there's abuse. And do you know what? This is just adding to all the other issues that we've got in our industry with regards to police not being able to attend and do whatever. And we're having to take it on ourselves. I mean, there's so many videos just over this weekend where, you know, a charity box has been stolen, you know, and the damage it causes. But all right, the damage me and you will have to pick up the pieces of. But the members of staff that were working there that have just been like, you know, mentally abused there with that all that action, you know, who takes care of that? We pick up the pieces together, right? We don't get any resources to help us. So all we're saying is, don't give us another issue on top of all the issues that we've already got to have to be concerned about every single time we're out or we're not in the shop and we're worrying about what's going on. I find myself looking at CCTV, is everything all right? You know, peak hours of the day, you know, dialing in and thinking, is everything okay at the store?
So I think there's a good one out there is, you know, engage with us first before you make your policy decision.
I think we can also give them lots of different examples if they were to come to our stores, any one of them, right? I got Danny Bills in. Let me send another letter out to him and say, come and have a look. Come spend an hour or two serving customers and see what kind of a situation we've got. We've got a beautiful community, but there's always that element in that community that causes problems. We all know that. Right? And we just don't want to fuel them with another reason to come and abuse our staff.
Correct. Well, look, it's been great. I think there's some great examples come out there, Ats, and I think the more us as a retail family keep shouting about this, spreading the word and getting it into government, hopefully someone might listen to us. Thanks, Ats.
I think so. And if your manifesto slogan was change, we'll change this.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Cheers.